cultural bridges between our lands.
Good afternoon, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila and Bangkok, Thailand. Hello, Gila.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Gila Pablo bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines, the Iglesia Ni Cristo has revealed the list of national candidates it will be voting for.
Kinikilala ng mga miyembro nito.
Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. will represent Manila in a leaders' summit between the United States and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations next week.
And the families of the victims of the two Boeing 737 MAX crashes in October 2018 and March 2019 asked a Texas judge to overturn a $2.5 billion settlement between the aircraft manufacturer and the U.S. government.
Three children in Indonesia have died from a mysterious liver disease.
First in our news, the Iglesia Ni Cristo or Church of Christ members will be voting as one on May 9. And this is part of the biblical teaching upholding unity in the church. On May 3, in the Net 25 news program Mata ng Agila, the list of national candidates that the INC members will be voting for was revealed. The INC is supporting presidential bet former Senator Bongbong Marcos Jr. and his running mate, Davao City Mayor and presidential daughter, Sara Duterte Carpio. Here's more.
Sa araw ng Lunes, Mayo 9, 2022, muli na namang maririnig ang boses ng mamamayang Pilipino. Nakabantay at nag-aabang ang maraming Pilipino bilang mata ng halalan. Naabangan na kung sino ang mga susunod na mamumuno sa ating bansa sapagkat sa mahahalal na Pangulo nakasalalay ang susunod na 6 na taon na pamamalakad ng ating gobyerno. Pagkatapos ng mahabang panahon ng kampanya ng mga politiko sa iba't ibang dako ng ating bansa, walang sino man sa kanila ang kampante hanggat hindi pa nadedeklara ang tunay na nagwagi sa halalan. Naabangan na ng maraming Pilipino kung sino ang opisyal na pagkakaisahang iboto ng Iglesia Ni Cristo. Ang kaisahan ng Iglesia ay kinikilala ng mga miyembro nito na isa sa mga aral sa Biblia na dapat nasundin. Ang pasya ng pamamahala ng Iglesia ay iginagalang ng mga miyembro nito. Ang mga politiko naman ay kinikilala ang magagawang tulong ng unity ng Iglesia sa kanilang ikapapanalo sa Mayo 9, araw ng Lunes sa araw ng botohan. Narito po ang mga kandidato na pagkatapos ng masusing pag-aaral at pagsasaliksik, iaanunsyo ng Iglesia Ni Cristo ang mga mapapalad na mga kandidato na kanilang tutulungan. Dito lamang yan sa Mata ng Agila, Net 25. Ang pinakamapalad na tutulungan ng Iglesia sa pagkapangulo ay si Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. Sa pangalawang Pangulo, Sara Duterte Carpio. Sa pagkasenador, Jejomar Jojo Binay, Alan Peter Cayetano, Joseph Victor J.V. Gomez Ejercito, General Guillermo Eliazar, Francis Joseph Cheese Escudero, Jinggoy Estrada, Sherwin Win Gatchalian, Lorna Regina Loren Legarda, Robin Padilla, Joel Tesdaman Villanueva, Mark Villar, at Juan Miguel Migs Subiri. Para sa mata ng Agila, matatag, matapag, matapat.
Sa ating mga kapatid na Iglesia ni Cristo, ako po at ang aking pamilya, 10 ng buong alyansang nakapaloob sa Uniteam ay labis na nagagalak at buong pusong nagpapasalamat sa suportang inihayag ng Kapatirang Iglesia ni Cristo sa pangunguna ng inyong tagapamahalang pangkalahatan, Kapatid Eduardo V. Manalo.
Ang pagpili sa amin ni Apo Bongbong Marcos bilang mga kandidato na inyong sinusuportahan sa pagkapresidente at vice-presidente sa darating na halalan ay isang malaking karangalan na may kaakibat na hamong nakatuon sa aming kakayahang mapag-isa ang bansa, mapagbuklod ang mga Pilipino at maitawid ang sambayanan sa krisis na dulot ng pandemya.
Sisikapin po namin na ang tiwalang ipinagkaloob nyo sa aming tambalan ay magbubunga ng tunay na pagkakaisa ng mga Pilipinong nagmamahal sa Pilipinas at walang alinlangan na sama-samang haharap sa mga pagsubok na daraan sa paghanda ng magandang bukas para sa ating mga kabataan.
Muli, maraming salamat po sa inyong tiwala.
Maraming salamat sa buong kapatiran ng Iglesia ni Cristo.
Meanwhile, in a campaign rally of his ruling party, the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan in Cainta, Rizal, President Duterte reiterates that he would not be endorsing any presidential candidate in the May 9 elections. Let's listen in.
Bago ako magtapos, magsabi salamat po. Just 2 minutes. Alam mo, sinadya ko talaga. Huwag kayong maniwala niyang mga chismis-chismis. Wala akong susuportahan na presidente. Neutral ako. Kasi mahirap kasi pag nandyan ako. Ang pinayagan ko lang ng cabinet member because he is the president of a political party, si Secretary Jose. But the others, lalo na yung mga military, sinabi ko, stay clear. Huwag kayong, kasi mahirap ang tao magsabi, nakalamang yan sila, ang pera ginamit ni Duterte, may pera kasi sa Malacanang. Yung pera po, walang pera dyan na para sa eleksyon, para magpapanalo ka ng kandidato mo. So, dito sa wala itong senador, malami kayo papilian eh. Pero dito limitado. Kaya, I have said it, maybe yesterday, said it before, and for the nth time, I say to you now, wala akong kandidato pagka-presidente. Neutral ako hanggang matapos ang eleksyon. At maibigay ko yung bagong presidente na ihalal ninyo. So,
meanwhile, the Commission on Elections said the start of the final testing and sealing or FTS of vote counting machines or VCMs did not encounter any issues. COMELEC Chair Sedamin Pangarunan attended an FTS activity held at the San Juan Elementary School in San Juan City. Let's listen in.
Magandang impact nito sa voting kasi nakikita natin na yung proseso sa election ay okay naman dito sa final testing natin at saka sealing at saka yung pagcast ng boto. Nakita natin yung proseso dito na napaka-smooth o walang malfunction or anything. Kaya I'm very thankful na ganito ang kinalabasan ang resulta.
The poll automation law requires the conduct of final examination and testing of the VCMs to be used in each polling precinct. After the process, the VCM shall be closed, sealed by the Electoral Board, and will only be open again on Election Day. The FTS shall end on May 7, although also the last day of the campaign period.
Foreign Affairs Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. will represent Manila in a leaders' summit between the United States and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations next week. Philippine ambassador to U.S. Jose Manuel Romualdez said the top diplomat would attend on behalf of President Duterte. President Duterte opted not to attend as the summit falls on a date when the country would have already named its president-elect. The envoy said Manila's participation in this special summit is important because the discussions are expected to center on a wide range of areas of mutual interest and concern. Among them are defense and security, future pandemic response, climate change, maritime cooperation, economic engagement, energy, digital technology, and strengthening people-to-people ties, among others. The special summit, hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden, will run from May 12 and 13 in Washington, D.C.
Meanwhile, President Duterte has vowed to ban online cockfighting following an outcry over the industry sparked by the disappearance of dozens of workers and concerns about the social costs of gambling. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año had advised the president to ban it due to its social impact. Take a look.
Loud and very clear to me that it was working against our values and yung impact sa pamilya pati sa tao. Ang labas na hindi na natutulog yung sa bungiro 24 hours, so isabong will end by tonight, bukas.
We will wait for the official communication kung paano po ba natin isasagawa yung ika-nga. Isabong betting station para po hindi po magkaroon ng kaguluhan sa pag-i-implement po natin itong utos nga ng ating presidente. May 8 na po tayong nakasuhan na pulis. Yung iba po doon, ma'am, ay na-dismiss na, na-suspend, at yung mga iba naman, ma'am, ay undergoing summary hearing proceeding. Yung mga pulis naman po, ma'am, na na-involve po doon sa isang kaso ng mga nawawalang sabungan, particularly dyan, ma'am, sa San Pablo, Laguna, ay nakapagsampa na po tayo ng kaso sa mga pulis na na-identified po na mga kaanak noong mga panahon na dinukot po yung isang master agent sa Laguna sometime August of 2021.
Online cockfighting or isabong came under scrutiny this year after the alleged kidnapping and suspected murder of 34 people who had supplied roosters to a licensed isabong operator. Senator Ronald de la Rosa, a Duterte ally who chaired a public hearing into the sport in March, said the victims were suspected of sabotaging the roosters so they would lose their fights and they would then bet on the other roosters. In one extreme case, a young Manila mother was accused of selling her 8-month-old daughter for about 45,000 pesos to a buyer she contacted through social media in March to pay off isabong debts. Police said the girl was later found and the buyer arrested.
President Duterte said he is avoiding taking an adversarial approach to the Russia-Ukraine crisis because such a move would only put the country in danger. During the campaign rally of his ruling party, the Partido Demokratiko Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan in Cainta, Rizal, Duterte said he prefers a friendly approach because there is a possibility that the Philippines might be targeted in case this escalates into a nuclear war. He noted that U.S. troops used to have an air base in Clark and that the enemies of the U.S. know that some of its servicemen are still in the area. Let's listen it.
Matagal ito at kung lumakit ang gera, Russia kontra Ukraine. Pag nagsumabog ito, naging nuclear, medyo medyo delikado na tayo. Kaya sinabi ko na noon, bakit ako yun niya, kaibigan, kung may gira, tatamaan talaga tayo because nandito yung Amerikano at maraming silang armas na nandito. But we are not really sure kung ano ang laman sa mga submarino at yung sa barko nila. At dito sila nag-stop over kasi nandito yung Subic noon. And I allowed them to unrestricted use kasi wala na rin ako magawa. Ang ating armaments good only for the insurgency problem in keeping the integrity of the Filipino land. Kung magkaletse-letse ito, magsumali ang China, they would probably hit Taiwan and Philippines. Sigurado yan. Sigurado ako.
In April, Duterte and Xi expressed deep concern over the Russia-Ukraine conflict, hoping that the two countries would seek a peaceful settlement. Thousands have reportedly been killed and more than 10 million have fled to neighboring countries since Russia launched a war in Ukraine on February 24. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief says the European Union is doing everything it can to contain the war in Ukraine. He said the EU wants the war in Ukraine to end as soon as possible. Let's watch this.
Hacemos todo lo posible para evitar que la guerra se extienda horizontalmente, afectando a otros países, o que se extienda verticalmente utilizando armas más destructivas. Estamos ayudando a Ucrania, pero sin entrar en la beligerancia, eso sería extender la guerra y no lo queremos, y al mismo tiempo reforzamos nuestras sanciones.
EU officials late Tuesday handed over a draft plan to member states on a new package of sanctions to punish Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, but some members are jockeying to opt out of an oil embargo. The Commission's proposal would phase in a ban on oil imports from Russia over 6 to 8 months, with Hungary and Slovakia allowed to take a few months longer. But Slovakia, which, like Hungary, is almost 100% dependent for fuel on Russian crude coming through the Druzhba pipeline, has said it will need several years. Slovakia's refinery is designed to work with the Russian oil and would need to be thoroughly overhauled or replaced to deal with imports from elsewhere, an expensive and lengthy process. Other officials speaking on condition of anonymity said Bulgaria and the Czech Republic could also seek sanctions opt-outs. One European diplomat warned that granting exemptions to one or two highly dependent states could trigger a domino effect of exemption demands that would undermine the embargo. President Duterte earlier warned his successor to bear the brunt of increasing oil prices brought by the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. In his speech in Clark, Pampanga, he also appealed to transport groups holding protests over fuel price hikes to thoroughly understand the factors driving up oil prices. Let's watch this.
Oil, tataas ng tataas yan. I think that the war in Europe will be one of attrition. I'd like to make a warning to itong mga association ng transport or everything. That is not the end. Every time that you complain and go into a demonstration, just make sure that you realize and understand the importance of oil and how it would affect all nations. Talagang magdaan tayo ng hirap. Kaya nagpasalamat ako sa Diyos na magtapos na ako, bilisan na lang niya ang mga araw kasi kawawa talaga itong susunod. Tignan niyo. Hindi ito na yung, hindi everyday the prices will increase and increase and increase until we can have a stable situation. Pagbagsak niyang nuclear, one for each country, the Philippines will not be an exemption if war really breaks out. Because of the Americans, itong Clark Air Base ito, and they are there sa Olongapo, and the enemies of America knows that or know that may mga Amerikano na nakabase dito until now.
Duterte earlier said Russia's invasion of Ukraine deserves condemnation, describing the ongoing armed conflict as so brutal. Malacanang said the Philippines joins the rest of the world in praying for an early and peaceful resolution to the conflict between the two countries.
Meanwhile, Russia's attack on Ukraine has mostly been in the east, and that makes what happened yesterday a bit of a surprise because a missile attack on Lviv in western Ukraine just happened. Take a look. Officials said the western hub of Lviv and a mountainous region bordering Hungary was targeted for the first time. The mayor of Lviv said the strikes caused power outages in parts of the city. He also said one person was wounded. Officials are now still trying to restore power in some areas. It was a place of a safe haven for Ukrainians during the war, and Ukrainian media said it was the first time the region was hit since the Russian invasion in late February. The Kremlin earlier warned it will target flows of weapons in the western part of the country. While to southern Ukraine, it is another story. Take a look. The Ukrainian military said that Russian forces had just launched an offensive on the besieged Azovstal steel. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
Tapula ka! Sa puti ako! Larga!
Pula, sa puti. Anong kaguluhan to? Masama ang sugal. At eleksyon ngayon, kaya bawal yan.
Ayon sa Omnibus Election Code, ang pag-organisa ng mga perya, sabong, boxing o kahit anong kaganapan na may sugal ay isang election offense.
Pwede yan! Nagre-relax lang naman kami.
Bukod sa masama ang sugal, importante din sa alala ng ating buong atensyon. Dapat hindi tayo nadidistract ng mga panalo ko! Pakawalan niyo ako! Hindi na ako uulit! Ako si Mr. Bawal na nagpapaalala sa inyo na ang sugal, election man o hindi, huy! Bawal yan!
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Now, earlier we were in the eastern part of Ukraine, and now we have another story. The Ukrainian military said in the southern part of Ukraine that Russian forces had launched an offensive on the besieged Azovstal steel plant, where Kiev's forces are holed up in the city of Mariupol. Take a look.
Станом на цю хвилину триває потужний штурм території заводу «Азовсталь» за підтримки бронетехніки, танків, зі спробами висадки десанту за допомогою катерів та великої кількості піхоти. Ми зробимо все можливе для того, щоб відбити цей штурм, але закликаємо вжити негайних заходів щодо евакуації цивільних, які знаходяться на території заводу, та безпечного їх доставлення в Запоріжжя та на підконтрольну Україні території. Маріуполь – це Україна.
Now, the powerful assault happened just as more than 100 people were making their way to safety, and they've been trapped there for weeks. Now, fresh satellite imagery by private U.S. firm Maxar showed a devastated Mariupol with almost all of the steel plant destroyed. Odessa's regional governor Maxim Marchenko said a Russian missile strike had destroyed the airport runway as Moscow continues targeting infrastructure and supply lines deep in the west of the country. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk hailed the evacuation of civilians from Mariupol's beleaguered Azovstal plant as a success. However, she warned that tens of thousands more of civilians remain trapped throughout Mariupol. Take a look.
Росія бомбардувала Азовсталь безперервно. 24/7 летіли ракети, і люди жили в завалах, в підвалах, не маючи шансу врятуватися. Вони мали 3 доби режиму припинення вогню, щоб вийти, принаймні частково вийти назовні і врятуватися. І ми сьогодні побачимо.
The joint UN and Red Cross operation was the first completed civilian evacuation from the giant Azovstal steel factory, where Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have for weeks been trapped, hiding as Russian forces besiege and pummel the city. The Russian army said earlier that its forces and pro-Moscow separatists were using artillery and planes to target the Azovstal plant, where Ukrainian fighters are making their last stand. The Russian Defense Ministry accused members of the Azov battalion and other Ukrainian troops of using a pause in fighting to once again take up their combat positions at the plant.
In a speech to Ukraine's parliament, President Volodymyr Zelensky thanks the United Kingdom, Europe, and the whole world for supporting the country in its conflict. With Russia, he also warned of an unpleasant surprise that awaits the aggressor. Let's watch this.
Насамперед, я хочу подякувати лідеру Великої Британії Борису Джонсону та всьому народу Об'єднаного Королівства за слова, які ми чуємо, за дії, які ми бачимо. за підтримку, яку ми відчуваємо, за допомогу, яку ми реально отримуємо, за перемогу, яку ми разом точно здобудемо. Так само, як і наша взаємодія та підтримка наших британських союзників. Передусім, це зброя і техніка для наших військових, які захищають від російських окупантів і Україну, і Європу, весь світ. Не буду озвучувати всі деталі на широкий загал. Хай це щодня стає для агресора неприємним сюрпризом.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced another $376 million in UK military aid for Ukraine and hailed the country's resistance to Russia as its finest hour.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin told his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, that the West must stop supplying weapons to Ukraine and accused Kiev of not taking talks to end the conflict seriously, accusing Ukrainian forces of committing war crimes and claiming the EU was ignoring them. President Putin told President Macron the West could help stop these atrocities by putting relevant pressure on the Kiev authorities as well as halting the supply of weapons to Ukraine. Putin also said Kiev was not being consistent or ready for serious work on ending the conflict. The Russian side is still open to dialogue, the Russian leader told Macron, according to the Kremlin readout. Macron's Élysée Palace office said that beyond reiterating calls on Russia to end the assault on its neighbor with a ceasefire and peace talks, he had urged Putin to allow evacuations from the besieged Azovstal steel plant in port city Mariupol to continue.
Stay tuned for more news. We'll be right back.
Nakalimutan mo na naman yung payong? Saan mo naiwan?
Hindi ko nga maalala eh. Kung naalala ko yun, hindi ko makalilimutan yung payong.
Lahat na lang nakakalimutan mo. Paano ka boboto ng mga kandidato kung makakalimutan mo ang lahat?
Pwede pong magdala ng kodigo sa araw ng halalan. Sa bahay pa lang, isulat nyo na po kung sino-sino ang karapat-dapat na kandidato. Isa pa, kung may dala kayong kodigo, mas mapapadali ang inyong pagboto at maaga kayong makakauwi. Mag-asawa po ba kayo?
Tingnan mo, pati ako nakalimutan mo. Mag-asawa tayo.
Eh, yan pala yung payong mo.
Hep, hep! Bago po kayo magdiskusyon, mabuti pa eh, bumili na lang po kayo ng balot sa akin. Malay niyo po, pati po first kiss. Maalala niyo po, nakakain ng balot.
Halika nga, kumain na tayo ng balot.
Para sa karagdagang kaalaman, makipag-ugnayan lang sa pinakamalapit na barangay o bisitahin ang COMELEC website.
A public service message of Net25 for Mata ng Halalan 2022. Matatag, matapang, matapat.
The best special effects movie!
Buka ngayon.
Hindi ba pwedeng lagyan na natin talaga ng upuan?
Hindi CGI nga eh. Dapat komportable ha. Pupunta ka naman doon sa rocking chair. Yan.
Kantahin mo, aanhin ang sinaing.
Yung ano, mind your own business.
Saan ka nakatira?
Hindi ko sasabihin dahil ako si Contraman.
Contraman pala.
Huwag kang makikinig. Makikinig ako.
Abangan ang exciting na showdown ng mga palabang security guards. Trabaho nyo, batin, minsan maghapon na kayo nakatayo.
Kain lang ang upo.
Kain lang ang upo, pag break lang talaga.
Yes, sir.
Gusto nyo ba ng upuan?
Huwag na lang po.
Okay na, sir. Sanay na sanay kami,
Pag
sir.
gusto nyo umupo, sabihin mo na. Gusto mo umupo? Saludo! Ito na ang pasanong. Ano ang kinukuha kapag gumagamit ka ng breast pump? A. Sabon. B. Ovum. C. Gatas. D. Pera. Agad. Ay, di mo na!
Ako na naman! Iiyak na ba ako dito?
Walang gusto pumindot.
Sabi ko na nga yun eh.
Mga professional. This Sunday, 7 p.m. sa Tara Game! Agad-agad sa Net 25!
Welcome back to the program. To Malaysia now, where the COVID cases are decreasing by the day. Our correspondent from Malaysia, here's Alfred Balmes. Alfred?
Hi, Gila. Good afternoon. Good news. The COVID-19 here in Malaysia continued to go down. As of May 3, Malaysia recorded 922 new COVID-19 cases, bringing the total number of cases in the country to 4,451,781 infections since the pandemic began. The Health Ministry COVID Now portal reported that 921 of Tuesday new COVID-19 cases were local transmission, while one imported. Recoveries continues to outpace new infections, with 5,520 patients recovering on Tuesday. This bringing cumulative number of recoveries in Malaysia to 4,384,384. The portal also reported that there were 31,833 active cases currently in the country, with 30,821 or 96.8% observing home quarantine and 14 individuals admitted to low-risk quarantine and treatment centers. The COVID Now portal reported that 998 patients or 3.14% of the total were currently admitted to hospital for treatment. The number of COVID-19 patients warded at intensive care unit throughout the country stands at 69, with 46 of these patients requiring ventilation support. The ICU utilization rate nationwide stood at 54.2%, with 5 states or localities recorded ICU usage rates of more than 60%. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry GitHub Data Respiratory reported that 9 COVID-19 deaths were reported on Tuesday, of which 5 were classified as broad-ended. This brings the death toll to 35,564. That would be the latest update of COVID-19 situation here in Malaysia, Jela.
Thank you for your update, Alfred, and stay safe.
Likewise, live reporting from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, this is Alfred Balmes, Philippine in recent times.
And the families of the victims of the 2 Boeing 737 MAX crashes in October 2018 and March 2019 asked a Texas judge to overturn a $2.5 billion settlement between the aircraft manufacturer and the U.S. government. Under that agreement, Boeing admitted to having committed fraud in exchange for the Department of Justice dropping some of the proceedings against it over the deadly crashes of Lion Air in Indonesia and Ethiopian Airlines, which killed 346 people total and caused the MAX to be grounded globally for 20 months. Take a look.
Yeah, we were very pleased with the way the hearing went today. The judge listened carefully and I think had a lot of concerns about how was it that the Justice Department concealed this agreement from the families. And we're very hopeful that the judge will end up ruling that this agreement has to be set aside and the victims have to have a chance to confer with the prosecutors about holding Boeing accountable.
We think that the Department of Justice did not do a full investigation. They only did a very partial and a very restricted area of the of Boeing's fraud.
I would like to see that the U.S. State Department of Justice is responsible enough to make sure that corporations don't get away with murder, that eventually corporations, the senior management within corporations can pay with criminal cases being been done against them, so that they can spend years in prison. That's the only way this kind of negligence can stop.
The January 2021 agreement included a $500 million compensation fund for victims' relatives, $1.77 billion in compensation to the airlines, and a $243 million criminal fine. Boeing has admitted that two of its employees had misled a group within the Federal Aviation Authority that was to prepare training for pilots in using Boeing's new MCAS flight software, which was implicated in both crashes. Relatives of the victims are now hoping for a quick decision from the Fort Worth judge.
3 children in Indonesia have died from a mysterious liver disease. The country's health ministry said, raising to at least 4 the global death toll of a fatal ailment, puzzling doctors from the U.S. to Asia. This severe strain of acute hepatitis has been identified in nearly 230 children in 20 countries, the World Health Organization said Tuesday, raising concerns of the disease's unknown origin. The symptoms afflicting the children include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and abdominal pain. Before their liver showed signs of inflammation, at least 1 death was previously reported. Indonesia's health ministry said that 3 children had died in hospitals in the capital Jakarta last month after displaying some of these symptoms. The children, aged 2, 8, and 11, also had fever, jaundice, convulsions, and loss of consciousness.
The cause of a deadly outbreak of severe liver failure in children continues to puzzle medical professionals who are nonetheless making progress in getting to the bottom of the mystery, according to the UN Health Agency. Dr. Philippa Easterbrook from the World Health Organization said that all the usual explanations for hepatitis did not apply to any of the children, and many of whom have had to have liver transplants after falling sick. Take a look.
I think it's important to emphasize that the causes of the cases remains very much under active investigation. We're looking at a range of possible underlying factors, both infectious and non-infectious, that may be causing the cases. And these investigations are continuing in both the existing cases as well as new cases from the countries that have already reported, as well as new countries that are beginning to report. But it is helpful to, I think, summarize what we've learned so far. First, that it does appear that none of the common viruses that cause acute hepatitis, that is hepatitis A, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and hepatitis E, have been detected in any of the cases. And similarly, none of the common bacteria or bugs that cause stomach upsets and gastroenteritis in children have also been detected. And then from the questionnaires that have been administered across the countries, there doesn't appear to be any clear link to a particular food or a common exposure, such as to a drug or to travel. And importantly, there is nothing to suggest a link to the COVID vaccine, as the vast majority of the children did not receive the COVID vaccine. I think you'll be aware of the reports of a possible link to adenovirus, which is a common infection in children, as one of the possible hypotheses of an underlying cause. And adenoviruses are a group of very common viruses that are spread from person to person, can cause respiratory infections and gastrointestinal infections, particularly in children. And it's been detected in around 74 of those cases that have actually been tested for this. But it is it's unusual for an adenovirus to cause this type of severe symptoms. And so this is what is being actively investigated at the moment.
In today's other news, North Korea just fired a ballistic missile, according to South Korea's military, just a week after leader Kim Jong-un vowed to boost Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal at the fastest possible speed. The launch was the latest in a string of sanctions, busting North Korean weapons tests so far this year, and came after U.S. and South Korean officials warned that Pyongyang was preparing to resume nuclear testing. Japan's Coast Guard also said that North Korea had launched potentially a ballistic missile. Repeated negotiations aimed at convincing North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear weapons programs have come to nothing. The North Korean leader warned that he could preemptively use his nuclear force to counter hostile forces at a meeting with top military brass last week. We are talking about North Korea now. U.S. President Joe Biden is due to visit South Korea in May.
Japanese energy conglomerate INEOS Holdings said Monday it will withdraw from a gas project in Puhit, Myanmar. INEOS is the latest energy giant to retreat from the Southeast Asian country. The company is involved in the Yetagon project of southern Myanmar along with the Japanese government and Mitsubishi Corporation. Together, they hold a 19.3% stake in the gas field, which has been operational for 2 decades. INEOS said it had decided to withdraw after discussions taking into consideration the country's current situation, including the social issues and project economics based on the technical evaluation of Yetagon gas fields. Tokyo is a major provider of economic assistance to Myanmar, and the government has long-standing relations with the country's military. After the coup, Japan announced it would halt all new aid, though it stopped short of imposing individual sanctions on military and police commanders. Malaysia's Petronas and Thailand's oil and gas conglomerate PTTEP also announced their withdrawal on Friday. Petronas subsidiary Karigali holds a roughly 41% stake in the Yetagon project, while PTTEP owns 19.3%. There has been an exodus of global energy companies from Myanmar, including Chevron and Total Energies, following last year's military takeover and subsequent allegations of human rights abuses. More than 1,800 civilians have died during a military crackdown, and more than 13,000 have been arrested, according to a local monitoring group. Petronas subsidiary Karigali holds a roughly 41% stake in the Yetagon project, while PTTEP has a 19.31% share. PTTEP said its stake will be reallocated proportionately to the remaining shareholders with no commercial value, effective upon regulatory approval. Petronas, which has operated the project since 2003, said in a statement the decision followed a review and was part of an asset nationalization strategy to adapt to the changing industry environment and accelerated energy transition. The 24,130 square kilometer field in the Gulf of Moatama produces natural gas and condensate. Tokyo Olympic silver medalist cyclist Azizul Mashi Awang said that he had been given a second chance at life after the 34-year-old Malaysian had open heart surgery. Azizul will sit out the Commonwealth Games and Asian Games later this year following surgery last month, but is still aiming to win a historic first Malaysian Olympic gold at Paris 2024, local media reported. He first complained of chest pains in February and was operated on in Australia late last month. Nicknamed the Pocket Rocket Man because of his small size and explosive power, Azovstal is the first and the only Malaysian cyclist to win a medal at the Olympics.
And unseeded Wang Zhiyi withstood a late fight back from world champion Akane Yamaguchi to record a stunning victory in the women's final of the Badminton Asia Championships. Now, China's Wang, ranked 16th in the world, needed treatment on a back injury but hung on to beat the Japanese top seed and defending champion Yamaguchi 15-21, 21-13, 21-19 in 78 minutes of pulsating action that had the raucous crowd rocking. Malaysia's Lee Shijia took the men's title with a 21-17, 23-21 win over Indonesia's Jonathan Christie, then tore off his sweaty top and hurled it into the Manila crowd in celebration. Christie fought back in the second game but failed to nail 2 game points. The 24-year-old Lee sealing the title on his first championship point when his opponent fired wide on a forehand. The Indonesian challenged the out call, but a video review confirmed it, and Lee collapsed on his back before tearing up his top and hurling it into the crowd, followed by his racket. On a good day for badminton, superpowered China, they also won the mixed doubles and women's doubles crowns. And the Energy Observer, an energy-efficient boat powered by sun, wind, and hydrogen, sails across the Gulf of Thailand as part of its 7-year world tour to experiment and optimize the use of renewable energies. Take a look.
The idea behind Energy Observer is to test all the technologies existing in terms of renewable energies and clean way of storing this energy, test them in very extreme conditions and make them more reliable, efficient, and eventually affordable to, let's say, as much people as possible, and develop new solutions for energy transition at land and at sea as well. We believe that it's really important to mix energies together and make them work together. So on that boat, we have 3 sources of renewable energies. We have solar, we have wind, and we have hydropower. And we have 2 ways of storing this energy. We have battery system, and we have hydrogen as a way of storing this energy. So hydrogen that we make out of seawater, so we produce it on the boat itself. So today we're in Thailand, and this is the 71st stopover for Energy Observer. We still have 2 years until the end of our odyssey, the final stop being in Paris for the 2024 Olympic Games.
Many sources of renewable energy we have enable us to use to always have a source of energy. We have wind if it's windy, solar if it's a day and not cloudy, but if we have none of them during night or I don't know when, we can use hydrogen to prolong to be able to have still energy.
The main difficulty in the Gulf of Thailand. So no sun too much current, and so for that we have to consume many hydrogen.
It'll take them 2 more years to sail around the world. Thank you, Gila, for keeping me company today here on ASEAN in Focus, as always.
You're welcome, You're very much welcome. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. And thank you for joining us today here in ASEAN in Focus. This is Gila Pablo from your Thailand Bureau.
And I'm Alma Angeles. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you back next week. And stay in the news, stay alert, because we live in extraordinary times.